and if I was an animal, it'd probably be a gorilla because my two kids love gorillas.
Hi, my name is Justin. I'm the founder and CEO of Iterable. We're a growth marketing platform for marketers to automate messaging across emails, push, and SMS. If I were to be an animal, probably a T-Rex. Previous animals are beast.
Hi, my name is Ethan Appleby. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vango Art. We are a curated art marketplace that launched as a mobile-only, one of the few mobile-only marketplaces out there. We do some cool things like let you visualize the art on your wall and make it really simple for you to buy the first piece of original art to replace that boring IKEA print of the Golden Gate Bridge that half of you in here have. And if I could be an animal, I don't know, I'd be a squirrel because I like climbing trees. No laughs. I'd be a giraffe too then.
Fair, fair. Great, thank you for that, guys. By the way, so our first piece of artwork in our office in Palo Alto was bought off of Vango. It's awesome, and we still have it up, which is pretty cool. Okay, yeah, on to mobile growth stuff. So if you can share a story about either a feature or a campaign that worked really well for you guys. It could be paid, it could be organic, referral, or whatever. What was the feature and why do you think it worked so well?
So I can start. I would say one of my favorite features that we launched was actually an email product first. And so for those of you that don't know what 8tracks is, it's a crowd-curated form of internet radio. So think of virtual mixtapes that you can create and share. And you can also search for mixtapes based on the kind of mood you're in. So you can search for a happy running summer playlist and find something that someone made for exactly that occasion. And so in order to re-engage our customers, we were sending out a monthly newsletter with cool music-related things like headphone giveaways or sponsored DJs, and we were spending so much time putting together this newsletter and getting pretty dismal open and click rates, and so we thought that it was time for a revamp. And so we realized that we weren't really using the data that we had at our disposal, even though we knew tons of things about our users, like which playlists they were listening to and which playlists they might like based on the top tags that they're searching for. And so even though it didn't feel like a lot of data and we definitely weren't ready to run with it, we decided to test it out in an email since it's such an easy sort of platform for validating ideas. And so we came up with a weekly digest that was sort of modeled off Quora, because I'm a huge Quora fangirl. And every week we sent playlists that we thought they would like. And we didn't include any of the sponsored content or giveaways or anything that we as staff liked. It was all just based on what the user was listening to, and we gave a little reason as well. And we found that compared to the monthly newsletter, we saw a 70% uplift in conversion to clicking through to playlists. And so that product was so successful that we sunsetted our newsletter. We stuck only with weekly digest with sort of minimal information like from the company and newslettery updates and maximize the personalized content. And then that also became the basis for our Web 4.0 redesign, which had a feed that was built with the same type of recommendation engine. And so it was sort of a weird email hack that just kept giving back.
So this is completely unscripted, but email, and I'm going to talk about Pocket because I just recently left Pocket. For Pocket's email too. So Pocket sends several emails out a week about this is the best content on the web based off what people have saved. And it's really high open rates, really great engagement. And what's unique about the Pocket email is there's a button to save content directly in the Pocket, so it's another engagement tool. And another campaign is probably the integration between Pocket and Firefox. So having a Pocket button on every Firefox browser has brought in millions of new users, and it has been great for Pocket.
So just to give some context on our product, so our clients are consumer apps who use us to send emails and push. So just to get an idea, how many companies here are e-commerce? Is your app for e-commerce? Your hands, okay. Cool. So we work with e-commerce companies and other consumer companies like Spotify and Yelp. So I'll just share an interesting use case we've heard. We have a client called Ease. If you guys heard of them, they're an Uber for marijuana, and it seems to be the case where the legal companies have the best ideas, And one of their ideas was this ice cream truck feature where they'll figure out when a delivery is in your area. And as it's in your area, they'll shoot you like, here's what's in store. Like you can get it in like 2 minutes, right? And I guess stoners are like easily amused by these sort of instant gratification. And that was like a big kind of campaign for them to implement. I think I haven't looked at the analytics, but I would imagine it works pretty well. Yeah.
So for us, we sell original art, which is one of a kind, one out there, and we found this idea of like, okay, limited quantity, people are going to jump after like the new art that we put on, and we found that wasn't always the case, and so we implemented push notifications and emails that notified you for if an artist you follow or favorited had just uploaded or sold a piece, and so we found it created this kind of FOMO when you would get a push notification that said, hey, so-and-so just bought a piece, and then someone else would buy it, and then it'd be like, they sold another piece and another one. And so, in a weekend we see these, we call them tornadoes, but it's like an artist will sell, a dozen pieces in one weekend because they get these push notifications, and so people jump on it, kind of like an auction in your pocket, if you will.
Cool. Very nice. Tim and Andrea, so I have a follow-up question too. So you mentioned email being a big channel for you guys. Do you guys have an idea of what the breakdown was between desktop versus mobile users? And did you do anything different, or did you ever change anything based on that information that you had?
Yeah, so desktop used to be our biggest platform, and about 2 years ago we saw a shift, and now I'd say desktop and mobile are neck and neck, but in particular iOS is really growing. And so the way that we've adapted is that people aren't just switching to mobile for your app, they're also switching to mobile to read email. So campaigns that worked really well on desktop can still really work well. So recently we actually, shameless plug for Branch, started using branch links in our weekly digest email, and then that allowed us to reap a lot of the same rewards for mobile that we were already reaping for desktop web.
I think all of us said email, and it's probably self-evident, but email is the purest way of communicating to your users. You can post something on Facebook, Twitter, and all that's, you have to go to the platform, and who knows, the algorithm will surface that. But with email, we love it because you can tell directly your users what you want them to see. And in terms of mobile versus laptop / PC, we saw 50-50. And we also had deep links within our emails because, again, that's a huge re-engagement tool.
Cool. So talking about growth, do you guys view growth as purely acquisition, or does retention and engagement also tie into your growth, whether your KPIs, your metrics, or just generally how you think about growth?
Yeah, so I think in general, so I used to work at growth on the growth team at Twitter. So the way we divided the team was into activation and retention. So it's very important to activate your new users within that first 7 to 14 days. And as they become an active user, maintaining that, right? At Twitter, we were able to figure out that if you became a core user, the likelihood of you staying a core user is 90+%. So all of our campaigns are around making sure you get to that point. So I think especially in times when you have less funding, or if you're earlier, right, it's very easy to maybe think only about the top end and forget about the retention side, which both are very important. Yeah.
Sure. So we focus on the acquisition part of it, and the reason why is we have, I'd say, an average funnel. We have really high repeat buyer rate and good unit economics. And so personally, we found, we figured with investors and looking at that we need to figure out the channels that we could acquire users, especially since art buying is something that people don't do all the time. And it's something new that we're trying to make easier and simpler. And so for us, it was really about like, okay, how do we go out there and test and figure out what the best channel for us is going to be so we can show that there's a large enough market.
I think at Pocket and Workflow, I was definitely focused on retention. Growth was never really an issue. And just figuring out what are those key aspects that users do to retain. So is it they save an article, they come back to it, they run a workflow, they create a workflow. So retention is more about understanding what are the key actions they take and trying to front load that in the getting started flow and onboarding.
Just out of curiosity, how many of you are on teams of 20 or less people? Okay. Yeah, so I think one of the hard problems that you run into when you work with a really small team, especially if your product team is, you know, 1 or 2 people and you're sort of centralized, is that you don't really get to focus on growth in terms of acquisition and retention at the same time, or at least if you do, you're like a superstar. So if you're in the position where you don't have any sort of natural incoming source of traffic, I think the best thing you can do is just focus on the retention. And so that's, you know, constantly testing the logged out version of your app or website and seeing what that first time experience is like. If you do have the sort of fortune of having a natural source of organic traffic, that's even better.
Great, great. And so we have people from all different stages. In fact, Justin, you worked at a large company and now a little bit of a smaller company. But this is a question for everybody. As you've seen your companies kind of change and evolve and grow, how have your growth tactics changed with it? So what you did in the early days when you were small versus what you're doing later.
Yeah, so I would say about 5 years ago when we really started seeing the rise of our natural growth, it was because the playlist and mixtape is such a personal thing that it lent itself to people sharing it on social media and creating tons of backlinks for us. And so that was really cool. And we had a great head of SEO that helped us tweak our pages a little bit so that even if you search for the word instrumental, there are just thousands of playlist pages linking to that and will come up as the first result. Over time, we've realized that sort of you can't really take organic growth for granted, and it's really hard to make it happen inorganically, or rather it's really expensive. So if your users, if your users cost a lot to keep, and in music they always do because we pay royalties on what they stream, then you don't really get to spend money acquiring them. And so then our focus was 100% how do we get as many of those people that are finding us on Google onto our website. And so as people switched from web to mobile, this became harder because if you're discovering us on StumbleUpon or Tumblr, you're opening up a weird web view within their apps, and it's very, very hard to convert them into app users because of the number of steps. And so that's where Branch has really helped, and also just tweaking our mobile web pages for that use case has really helped.
At Workflow, one of the growth tactics that we've stumbled upon inadvertently is running workflows that have a social component. So if you listen to music, that song and that article, that song will post onto Twitter, and so your friends will see it's run, that action was run by Workflow. At Pocket, in terms of growth, last year, at the end of the year, Pocket launched recommendations, which is a ability to discover new content. So a lot of people know of Pocket as a read it later service, not as a place to explore and discover new content. And with the recommendations portion, there's a ability to share content, share it to Twitter, share it to Facebook. So in that way, let your whole community and friends know what content you're reading.
I'll talk about how Twitter, kind of their growth team evolved. So in the earlier days, the growth is really just about the acquisition, sort of the initial onboarding. So Twitter didn't really use any of the emails that they had or any kind of content. So as we got more and more users, a large amount of them, maybe 60% plus, were inactive, and it became a pretty, a dominant part of the user base. And that's where a lot of machine learning came into play. Once you have sizable, massive customers, you can start using data, and it's common to what you guys mentioned as well. One of the key things was getting your weekly digest of tweets. That was very sort of helpful for getting more resurrection. Another one was this is if you're a social app, it's people you may know. So figuring out who else you may know use the app, and there's a bunch of other ones you can check out on Twitter that to really bring more pull where your friends are on and you feel like you want to be a part of a community. So depending on if your app is more social, you can think about implementing those strategies.
I think for us, so we're a seed stage company, and it's really come down to sort of maybe even length of time. I think early on, right, it was sort of like how many relatives was I going to call to like double our sales each week? It's like how many aunts do I have left? And so it's very much like, right, this idea of like hacking and almost thinking about it in like a week-to-week basis. And I just think over time, it just grew, right? So then it was kind of like, okay, let's think of sort of features and products and things that are going to take 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks, and 4 weeks. And so now we're kind of like on like a monthly to kind of quarterly sort of product roadmap, okay, here's what we need to do. And so just becoming more strategic and thought out, whereas in the beginning it was definitely sort of a week to week, like, okay, what are we doing right now to grow 5%?
Ants don't scale, I believe Paul Graham said. Great, so a couple of you mentioned push notifications. And I'm curious what are some maybe effective push notification strategies that you've seen work well, and or who are people that are doing push that you think are doing it really, really well? Somebody has to know something.
So for a company that's doing it really, really well, and this might be self-evident, most of the news apps do it well. So like today, the New York Times told me about the election wins and losses, and that's very timely for me. I wasn't even paying attention to it. I'm like, oh my goodness, Rubio lost in Florida, right? So I think, it might just be by virtue of their service, and that's why those are good. I have one, so Pocket just recently launched notifications around who's following you, and that is something I think that they've seen and we've seen to be very powerful, because you're always curious, like, who's following me, why are they following me, and it itches, it makes you pull you back into the app.
So one app that I'm a huge fan of is Bands in Town. What I think is awesome about their push strategy is that it's also combined with a great onboarding strategy. So when you first join Bands in Town, they ask you to name bands you like. And I know from personal experience at 8tracks, when we've done onboarding flows that ask people which artists they like, people just go crazy. They love just collecting all the artists. And at the same time, you're just giving all of your valuable data and re-engagement juice to the app. So I think that's brilliant. And then for the next year, they're just gonna ping you anytime one of those bands is in town. And it gives you a reason to get push notifications that you're not gonna disable. So I think any strategy that you don't want to turn off is doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, so I think with push it's easy to go overboard, or maybe the feeling with push is that's pretty annoying. So a good strategy in general is making sure you're sending the right amount and sending relevant content, and potentially coupling that with other channels. So what we see some of our clients do is they'll do email notifications, and only if the email isn't opening, they'll do a push. Or if your push is engaging your opening, they'll skip the emails. Or if you're an active user on a daily basis, you get no notifications, right? So I think it's really important to keep that channel open. So once you turn it off, when that user gets annoyed with your push, they may just delete the app, and that's really a big loss. I think I'm not a huge fan of just getting a lot of pushes, but the ones that I like are from Netflix, where it's like, here's a new episode of a show that you really like. It's very relevant, and you want to hear about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, mine would be the example I talked about earlier, which is relevant and timely. So if you follow an artist and they upload a piece or sell a piece, you get notified. I will say one funny thing, I think it's interesting, the lifestyle companies out there, like Jack Threads or others, they send basically these sort of nonsense kind of like, hey, have a great day, just like all these icons. I'm always curious like what people think about those, because I don't actually know how they do, but I will say we sort of experimented with that. We basically had a conversation with our users, which was just like, hey man, nothing on Netflix, like did you check out the new pieces in Vango this week? John, or something like that. And like that was our most converted thing, was this made-up character John that was having a conversation with you, because we all have a friend named John, and so I don't know if we tricked people into thinking it was actually John.
I like that strategy. So what about successes or even challenges that you guys have seen with in-app messaging, either in your own apps or with other apps?
I think for us, success is that push notifications, as they disappear sometimes and they're hard to find, or you see it and you're like, oh, where did that go? So for us, it's been good introducing, almost like replacing emails and introducing a new feature, or we did like a Discover Weekly, sort of Spotify-like 8tracks type a recommend list. And so letting people know about that and where it is, so kind of like a new tooltip, I guess, has been really helpful.
I think the challenge with in-app notifications is the segmentation, making sure you get that right, and it's getting the right content in. I think it's more difficult than maybe getting an email out or getting a push out, because it really depends on when you open it, what have you done before, what were sort of the previous engagement. So I think that's something that I think you want to think about early when you're designing these notifications.
I mean, I think the biggest thing to be careful with in-app messaging is that you're only delivering content that is really necessary and relevant. Because if the user is already in the app, there's a really good chance that they already are engaged. And so sometimes the messages can be really intrusive. At least that was our experience with in-app messaging. We realized there were lots of things that we wanted to say, but we didn't pay as much attention to when we should say them. And so not only were they not doing well according to the data, we were seeing a lot of tweets where people were complaining about the annoying messages. So we eventually just turned them off and sort of let the app speak for itself.
Cool. Let's talk about some of those complaints. In general, user review, we don't have to talk about the specific complaints, but in general, user reviews can be both effective yet also challenging if you get some negative ones. How important are user reviews for the apps that you guys are working on? And do you basically solicit them explicitly like some apps do?
Yeah, we've actually experimented with soliciting them explicitly, and it generally works really well because if you use a sort of dummy prompt that appears before the system notification that asks people to rate the app, then you have the chance to not display that system notification if they give you a negative review. So I'm sure that's not really a trade secret anymore because everyone's doing it. But we've also found that there are times where you just can't avoid an onslaught of 1- and 2-star reviews. For example, sometimes you just have to make updates for legal or technical reasons that nobody really wants to release, but you just have to do it. And it's annoying because it messes with your overall average, but I think the key is to focus on stability. That's the #1 way to avoid really terrible ratings. And if you're really going for the sort of 4- and 5-star strategy and you really want to boost your rankings, just know that it's a really hard battle, because in order to get into that sort of top 10 apps, you have to have really high rankings in really fast succession. And if you're not in the top 10 after all of the effort you put into getting those rankings, then you probably won't be seen, because a lot of data shows people don't really scroll past the top 15 when they're looking through the App Store. So it's only worth it if you really think you can make it to the very top.
So at Workflow, we really think we can make it to the top, and it's critical. We have a Slack bot that sends every kind of rating directly into our Slack channel, and so we look at them, see what users are saying is bad or good, and I think it really matters when someone opens the App Store and says, "Oh, this is a Essentials app," and there's like 4.5 star and 1,000+ ratings, and so it's something we really care about, but we don't have anything right now around do you want to rate this app? Something to consider, but nothing right now.
Yeah, I think for most of our clients, they don't expect to be in the top 10 for the categories, but they do use the app as sort of an additional channel in addition to the website for driving sales or driving engagement. So the feedback they do get could be from emails, right? In terms of in terms of number of spam complaints or number of bounces, and if you value that channel, it's important to make sure you're not sending people who are not engaged. Kind of going back to relevancy, and just keeping that channel open if you want to build a sort of sustainable business. Yeah.
So for us, we always get 5 stars from buyers and 1 stars from artists who aren't selling. And it really pisses me off, because I'm like, you're not even rating the app, you're just mad because your art's done. We actually removed the prompt. We don't. A couple of things. So when you're small and you don't have that many people possibly rating, and like you get some, maybe you're getting high reviews, which we were at the time, or we still are, but we were. It was like we didn't want to release because we're like, we're going to lose all those. Because if you guys know how the App Store works, where you only see the current version, you can then switch over to all. A couple of things to keep in mind. One, this isn't really the question you asked, but we actually moved to pushing like on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, because we found a bump in traffic every time we do that, because it updates the app. The other thing I will say is you need a minimum, I think, of 5 ratings to have that show up, and actually your cost of acquisition goes down if you have those ratings, so they don't even show up. So we always pretty much just do it as a team, but make sure whenever you release to get at least the 5 stars, hopefully, because that will show up when you're doing mobile advertising, and that I think counts a lot when people are looking to install an app off of Twitter or Facebook or whatever.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting. And we used to do the same thing when we had a mobile app. We'd have all of our friends go reread it. That was great.
You only need 5 people, so
That's well, we didn't have very many friends. So A/B testing there's a lot of great A/B testing tools out there. Some people love it, some people don't use it very much. I'm curious if you guys utilize A/B testing and what results you've seen, and if it's something that you'd recommend for other app developers.
I mean, in short, you should. We use Taplytics and Mixpanel to do a lot of our A/B testing. I don't think we A/B test nearly as much as we should, but we have seen, I'm trying to think of a case, but we definitely have seen things that are such a small change that will lead. I think with our referral program, like we did a small change to the text, where we switched it from credit, we were doing credit and discount, I think, and one was 10x the other. When we use, you get a credit for $50 versus you get a discount of $50. So I definitely encourage it, and Mixpanel and Taplytics have been helpful.
Yeah, I think A/B testing your messaging, whether it's in-app or via messages, is a no-brainer. We've seen simple things like in an email changing the name from Lisa to Sarah increase open rate by 50%. So there's a lot of like non-intuitive things that you just have to test out and see the results. Yeah.
Totally agree that it's something you should do. The problem at both Workflow and Pocket is that there's the product roadmap of what we need to do is just so exhaustive that like you don't have any time or right now bandwidth to say these are the things we want to. It's an excuse. It's an excuse to A/B test the things that you've already rolled out. But you should totally do that.
Yeah, I think that might be the common problem that you guys have faced too. Is you should be A/B testing. It's a thing that we always guilt ourselves about, but it is really hard to decide what's worth A/B testing and how much money to spend on your software. So my rule of thumb is if you're not an e-commerce service that makes money for every conversion, it's really hard to justify the costs of something like Optimizely or Mixpanel. Although they're really great services and they work so seamlessly, it can be hard to to see the results in the form of pure conversion. So one of the easiest ways to A/B test is to actually use your email MVP. So we've actually used a service called Send With Us that just helps us split test email, and that's really great because a lot of the learnings that you get from email you can apply elsewhere on your website. Another thing that we've started using was the 6-pack SDK, and they're sort of just a client-side integration, so it's purely conversion-based testing, like does a red button do better than a blue button? But even those kinds of learnings are really useful. That doesn't mean that there aren't other cool ways to be data-driven. And so if you guys have Google Analytics, it's free up to a certain amount of traffic, and so even that can be hugely helpful if you're not quite ready to start doing split testing as a company.
So I said we didn't do A/B testing. Our cheap way of doing about it was having beta users. So we have a large number of beta users who we test things on before we launch into production.
Great. One more question on that too, because you mentioned conversions and kind of changing things to change the conversions inside the app. I'm curious if any of you have changed certain things inside the app that you found actually increased or even decreased conversions for you guys.
Yeah, so that onboarding project that I mentioned where we let people choose artists that they like, we tested that on 5% of our users, and we found that only 1 or 2% were more likely to come back the next day. But I mean, when you're dealing with, in the scale of millions of users, it's still exciting. I think the key there is just if you guys see conversion rates and they seem low, there's just Google like statistical significance calculator and see if it's significant. Sometimes it is. You'd be surprised.
This is like a secret tip from the Twitter days. We found a 30% increase in sign-up conversion when we had a username generator. So if you guys have people putting in their own usernames, whatever you can pre-fill, fill that out so people, just convert easier. Yeah.
I like it. Okay, kind of looking ahead, just a couple more questions, and then we're going to open it up for audience questions. So what advice would you give to basically developers or marketers on things that they should, one key thing that they should focus on over the next year?
So I have kind of a controversial answer because I know this is a growth panel, but I think that the number one thing you should focus on if you're a company that's dependent on getting more venture money in order to make your business model work, focus on your path to profitability. And so sometimes that means that it feels like your growth is taking a toll, but I think it'll be a lot better for long term if you know in advance how much time you need to be spending on growth and how much time you need to be spending on your business model. So if your business model relies on ads, ads can really be at odds with growth because in the short term they sort of affect the UX and they piss off users, but in the long term they make it possible for you to keep doing what you're doing. So in that case, think of growth as one aspect of your product portfolio. If you're a sort of premium or freemium model company, that's really great because it means that you can think of getting people to pay as sort of the top of your conversion pyramid, and so the bottom is acquiring the users.
I totally agree with that outlook. If you want to control your destiny and be able to raise when you want to raise and raise it in the terms you want, then focus on monetization and retention because those are levers you can control. And growth is something, if you don't have good organic growth, the ones you have, figure out how to monetize and then do the CAC LTV calculation and then go and use marketers and get new users.
So this is just for if you're a marketer, I'd imagine you're graded on sort of the conversions you're driving or the growth, and I think for a marketer to be effective, you need to try things out, right? You try new products, make changes without having to get engineering involved, right? Without having all these blockers. And there are tools out there now that really make that easy, right? There are these like data hubs like Segment and Particle that you can install one time, and now you can trial hundreds of new services and see what works for you and kind of build your best of breed marketing cloud that works for your app, for your site. Yeah.
Those were good. Okay, I only have one. I don't know, I was going to say messaging. I don't know, we're thinking a lot about like messaging as a way to both like early on get people convert. So we found that we're starting to play with messaging. It's a great way to both convert people as well as I think learn what your user wants, and it can be often an easy feature for you to implement in your app.
Awesome, thank you guys. So we're going to open it up to audience questions now. Let's see, one all the way back there.
Do you have any specific advice for apps that are growing from 0 users?
The question was, do you have any specific advice for apps that are growing from 0 users?
Call your aunt.
Yeah, I think if you're starting from ground zero, figure out what your best market is going to be and focus only on that market. If you try to go after too many different kinds of customers at once, then you run the risk of never truly engaging anybody. But if you can get a group of even 10 who are all kind of the same type of user, get them to love your app, then they're going to naturally spread the word, and that's the best thing you can hope for.
The other obvious probably solution is figure out a decent press plan, at least get one coverage somewhere. And it's so often the case where if one legitimate site covers it, just 3 or 4 other so-so sites will also cover it, and they'll give you just some traction and some users to go from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Get on Product Hunt. That's a good site. Yeah.
Other questions?
Do you guys use any CRM tools to manage your customers?
Question was if they use any
Or your users? Yeah.
CRM tools to manage their customers or users.
So what we see for enterprise clients with just different tiers of customers, they'll have Salesforce for their VIP customers, and they may schedule in automate sort of regular calls or sort of more relationship type tasks. Typically, we just see clients using their own database. I think there isn't a perfect solution for a if you're a consumer CRM. But it's something that actually we're building and working on that could be interesting. Yeah.
I think for most of us, we're more consumer facing, so it's not like an enterprise sell. But at Pocket, when we were selling advertising, we had like a CRM to know like which sponsors / advertisers we need to re-engage with.
Curious about email marketing tools that you guys use and recommend.
recommend.
So there's two that I've used, SendGrid and Mailgun. Both of them are good. Both of them, I like to say, are lizard brain, which is just like the bare essentials. If you want something that like comes with analytics, comes with targeting, like MailChimp probably, and we all know that service.
Yeah, so we use Send With Us for email, and they're just a layer that can go on top of SendGrid or any other email sending service that you use. And they'll just collect the data from your email service and help you split test. But another really good one is Kahuna. So they do push notification split testing as well, and we use them for that. But they also have a really great email service that I've yet to try, but I've heard good things.
So I'm a little biased since we run an email and mobile marketing platform. But I think if you're small, MailChimp is a good product. Typically what we see is in the early days, you use MailChimp for marketing, SendGrid for transactional emails, and something internal for triggered. As you get bigger, there's more enterprise products out there. And the decision becomes, do you want to build or buy? And what Iterable does well is we allow you to send through a very sort of a good amount of partners. So we can actually send through SendGrid or Spark Post or Dyn if you're used to that. And we can handle the emails and push in one platform. So we've actually worked with multiple clients who used to use Kahuna or ExactTarget and was able to consolidate that into one platform. Yeah.
Yeah, we use Send With Us as well. We started MailChimp, then Send With Us, and we use AppBoy a little bit.
You mentioned Kahuna. What level of personalization have you put in place and tie that into context with your push messaging?
Yeah, so with Kahuna, do you guys all know what Kahuna is, or do you get the basic gist of it? There is sort of an A/B testing layer over, you send all your users to them and they help you sort of segment and send scheduled push campaigns out. So the types of personalization that's worked well for us is we send users top tag. So tag is like a genre or activity or mood that you use to search for playlists. And so we'll send that over to Kahuna for a user and say, if you love rock, we have great rock playlists for you. And then when you open it, deep links to a page full of different playlists that are tagged rock. We haven't gotten too intense about personalization, but only because of technical restraints, we know that it works really well.
So for personalization, there's a couple products depending if you're e-commerce or more content-driven. There's a company called Boomtray that does content personalization. They work with companies like CBS and Sky. And then for e-commerce, there's one called Jetlore, which is based they're created by Stanford PhDs who work with a lot of big e-commerce brands. Yeah.
How do you measure the popularity of keywords in the App Store? Is there a way to see how popular keywords get, like the traffic it drives in App Store? So I haven't found a way to do it.
Have you seen a tool like Sensor Tower? There's a couple of tools that do kind of App Store optimization that you might look into. Yeah.
Is it like an App Annie?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah.
It doesn't provide how much traffic that each keywords get. Say if I type CRM, for example, you know how many people actually come to type CRM in App Store?
I'm not sure.
So the question was, for those that couldn't hear, are there any tools for measuring how many installs or how many users you get from different keyword searches inside the App Store? Not that we know of. Yeah, probably not. Okay, you're next.
Hey, my name is Wojtek. I made a productivity app called Focus List. Sorry, I have to. So anyway, my question is similar to gentlemen's over there. What's your experience with keyword optimization in App Store? And specifically, Mr. Tim, what's your experience with getting users from like featured app on App Store versus searching for something in particular in the App Store? Like how many users do you get are looking for, build workflows to automate things?
So getting featured is absolutely critical, and that's having a great relationship with the App Store manager. And you can only use that, I guess, arrow a few times a year, if that. And so that's why, I'm sorry, this is not like a easy solution. That's why ratings matter for us.
I was gonna say the App Store search ASO is freaking horrible. We're an art company, search art, it's about 100 games, and then like an on-demand grocery shopping app, and then like ours. So we focus a lot on our competitors, to be honest, because those are good, because they usually have unique names, so I don't know who your competitors would be, but put them in and then show up just right below them. It's harder because if they're searching for them, they're probably looking specifically for that, but it's easier, I think, to have somewhat of like a relevant rank.
Thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to connect a little bit funding with growth. So at which stage did you approach investors, and how did the investment or the investors help for your growth?
So the question was, at which stage did you approach investors looking for investment, and how did they help with your growth?
So I know Mike from way back, and Mike might be the best person to answer this.
Let's let him answer that. Go for it. Come on.
Okay, so there's really two ways to approach investors. You can either approach investors selling your past results, either revenue, user growth, that sort of stuff, or you can sell them on the dream. This is for your first round. This is for your seed round. We've done both with our two companies. With the first one, we basically built the app, we launched it, we were able to get featured because we knew somebody who knew somebody at the App Store review team, because that's like the only way that you can get featured unless you're already a big app. So we used that growth and we generated some revenue, and then we went to investors and said, hey, would you give us a little bit? They gave us a little bit of money, we went and grew some more, and then we went back and tried to get some more money. The problem with that is as soon as you generate revenue, or as soon as you have a certain growth trajectory, that's all they're looking at. They're looking at, what are your numbers, how are you growing, how can you increase it? With our second company, so with Branch, we really approached it as, we know what the big mission is, what the big vision is, and how big of an opportunity it is. Let's see if we can raise money before we actually go get traction. Let's build a prototype but not launch it in the market. And we sold the dream. Selling the dream is a lot harder because you don't have anything to show for it, but if you can convince the investors that what you're going after is a massive opportunity and you have the right team and product to solve it, they can't look at numbers and say, your growth's not good enough, no thanks. They want to believe that you can do it, and without anything to tell them otherwise, some of them might. So it's a lot harder to do that, but selling them on the dream. So that means you go approach them sooner. You build the product, but you approach it earlier on. Much harder to do, but it can sometimes be better than actually first launching, and then if you launch and you have some struggle in growth, then you're not going to be able to raise money anyway.
Does it help that you sold your first startup and only then went to sell the dream?
No. We actually still had the first startup when we went and started working on the second one, and went to invest in it actually, or search for investment. We ended up selling it for like pennies, like nothing, basically just to give it away to somebody so we didn't have to shut it down. I think what did help was the founding team had been working together for a year and a half, and they knew how well we worked together. And also we built Branch basically to solve the things that we faced as app developers, and so they knew the struggle was real, and they knew we were intimately aware of the problems and what we could do to solve them, and I think that helped. Okay, right there.
Yeah, Andrea, you mentioned that it was expensive to do acquisition with paid media. I'm curious if anyone on the panel has tried paid media for retention and re-engagement.
I think the ROI you get from custom audience targeting is actually really good from what we've heard. So with Facebook, you can give them a list of emails to target these users. So you'll segment out, okay, these are high value users, and target them with just maybe like 1,000 emails worth of ads. You can do that now with Pinterest and Google and other services. So that retargeting via emails is pretty good.
I was wondering how, in each of your companies, how did you get the first 5,000 downloads, the first 5,000 customers? I assume it was maybe partially paid and organic. Was it like some people featured you in blogs, or you approached them and asked, hey, we have this amazing tool, would you like to write about it? Something. That would be nice if you, what specific steps you took?
I'll chat with you about that.
Yeah, I mean, we did the Timber. We went to get featured. Or we got press, and then we got press to get an app feature, and then we got more press from that app feature, and we just sort of used that back and forth.
You wrote an email to the journalist, like to the publisher, to the Crunch.
Yeah.
How did you get that first press?
I mean, that's what we did. So we reached out, and if you have an interesting story like a launch or something, I mean, you know, right? You never focus on just like your feature, or even like where your app. It's like, what's the story and what's the benefit that you're really going after? And generally, if it's somewhat interesting, they'll gravitate towards it.
So related people, right? Related to the product.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
And finding reporters that have written about that space, right? I think like investor management is almost the same as press management. Like you have to figure out who's invested in this area, who's covered this area. Then you're gonna reach out to like 30 or 40 of them. A lot are gonna miss and never respond to you. You're gonna email them a couple times, they're still not gonna respond to you, and then they might respond to you, and then you got one, and then one might cover it, and then other people are gonna be like, oh, why am I not covering this?
Yeah, I would say if you're more of a B2C product too, the way that we got our first, I would say 5,000 or first million users even, was because we made it really, really easy to share. And so we got lucky in that our growth coincided a lot with the growth of StumbleUpon and Tumblr as platforms. And our product had, we have cover art on all of our mixes, and so it lent itself perfectly to being indexed in a lot of those platforms. And so if you can try to piggyback on other growing platforms, especially the emerging social ones like messaging apps, would be great to be the sort of early integrators for.
Last question. Who's got the best one? He kept his hand up.
I actually want to know something that Ethan said. When you said that if you get 5 reviews, then you get the stars, like it starts showing up. So I want to know what tools you use, or each of you use, in order to encourage your power users or super users to give you those reviews.
So the question was, what tools do you use to encourage your power users to actually give you reviews, or give you reviews when you do updates?
And don't say I need to contact my aunt to get those reviews.
Sorry, I mean, we use email. I mean, we literally just email or do it within the team, because you only need 5. I mean, the key is, they don't show you, so when you do an app install on Twitter or Facebook, all you see, you don't even see the number, all you see is the number of stars that show up. And you need 5 for that to happen, so the magic number is 5.
Okay, yes. Who had their hand up for a long time? Sorry, Elizabeth. Yeah.
So I was wondering if you had any quick ideas on anonymous user bases. I know that that's not a great idea, but I work in sexual health, and so anonymity is huge.
What in particular is your issue? Is it with like re-engagement and sending them emails and stuff? Or?
Right, like share, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we have this problem a lot too, not for exactly the same reasons, but we wanted, so our mobile apps require sign-in, our desktop app does not, and so we wanted the friction to be minimized for mobile. So we have, one button, Facebook Authenticate, and you're in, which makes it really hard to create usernames if we don't want to just steal their first and last name and publish it for the whole internet to see. So one thing that works is just to come up with a creative naming system. I'm sure there are like online databases that you can use with somewhat relevant words, or find lexicons of words that are interesting to you, and if you have engineering resources, you can come up with some pretty fun name generation tools.
Great. Thank you, guys. All right, thank you guys for coming. Real quick, let's give a round of applause to Elizabeth and Kate, who helped organize tonight's meetup. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Kenshoo, Amplitude, and Grow. We've got extra beer. Tons of beer. Hang out.